Start whenever. You can start, Party.
Okay. Welcome to our Game Jam submission, Maze Marauder. This game was created by
Daniel Yi.
Daniel Morgan.
Pradium Ja. So first we'll be discussing our intro and concept of our game. Next we'll be going through an intense dive into the gameplay. Then we'll discuss the code and algorithms used and conclude by talking about our inspiration for this project.
So our game can be broken down into two main components, the maze exploration and the dungeon fighting. The maze exploration is the initial component of the game. The user finds themselves spawned in the midst of a dense labyrinth. Racing against time, the user must gather resources and find gear, in an effort to equip themselves to stand a chance against the boss during the dungeon fighting component.
In the dungeon fighting component, the user will use the weapons that they have collected to combat the bosses. Each boss has a different set of abilities, so as a player, the user will need to adapt to the situation and use the gear they have collected.
After the fight phase, if the user succeeded, they'll move on to the next level and meet a new boss. A total of 3 levels. However, if the user does not succeed, then they'll be thrown back to the previous maze and they'll have another chance at improving their gear and fighting the original boss. So you might be wondering how we efficiently displayed a maze while maintaining a top-down view. We used a shader which runs on a GPU, and we'll explain more of that in our coding concept section.
Now for some gameplay.
So we'll start by looking at the menu via the top left icon. As you can see, there's an About Us section as well as an Instructions section. About Us talks about the developers of the program, of the game, and who we are, and just some basic information. If you click on the menu again, there's the Instructions. It has helpful tips, tricks, and it really just explains how the game functions and important things to keep in mind. So that's pretty cool. You can check it out. If you want to play the game, then again, just click on the menu icon. You can click main menu. That's where the play button will appear and you can play the game. Anytime you can escape the menu via the close menu section, but let's get started with the game. Yeah.
Alright, yeah, so this is a splash screen, and as soon as it finishes, you'll be thrown into a maze. So, in this maze, you are essentially in a maze. If you hover over an item, you'll have the option to collect it. You press G, and you interact with it, aka collect it. Now, usually the goal with this game is to get you to wander around, hopefully finding rooms among other things, and make sure, since you do have a timer that gets faster and faster, to collect the torches to increase the time that you have to collect and explore the labyrinth. Now, this is mostly an exploration game. There are probably going to be new features, but eventually, hopefully you'll be able to stumble across a room. I think this is probably one example. Yeah, this is an anvil. If we can collect another gem, uh, yeah, and then we can click on the anvil and get put into this menu. In this example, for example, you have 4 1s and a 2. So if you place in 4 tier 1 gems, what comes out is a tier 2 gem. And this is used later on if we do find a crafting bench to upgrade our weapons. Regardless, let's just keep on collecting gems and collecting items, and continue wandering around the maze. Ah, well, I guess you didn't find a crafting bench. That's fine though. We have a boss here. And essentially, after the labyrinth phase, we get thrown into pretty much just a giant room with boss. And as you see by the many snowballs, uh, that's basically our enemy. So essentially, this boss is pretty easy. So we just have to get close to it and use our sword a bunch of times. And yeah, we do defeat the boss. But later on, of course, as we get to the higher levels, it will be a bit harder. Now, in the next part, just remember that you do reset. So you do have to, gather stuff again and get weapons as well. And hopefully we'll have better luck here, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. This game is also structured so that the higher levels you're in, the better the chances are. In this case, you can press on the chest. Again, press G to interact, and you get a bunch of items. This, for example, is the snowball cannon. So, if you click on a random tile, a snowball gets thrown. Oh, yeah, and you can also use space to switch between weapons. Regardless, yeah, we actually got pretty lucky with a snowball cannon, and we have another chest here, and we get more items. Some of them are useless, but in this case, the snowball cannon was pretty nice. Another thing to note is that you can also drag and drop your items. So at the bottom, if you click on the gems, you can drag and drop it. You can, throw it on the ground. You can also move into other parts of your inventory, and the same holds for weapons. Regardless, really all that's left is the crafting bench, if we do find it. And really, the only way to find it is, again, to sort of wander throughout the labyrinth, hoping to find a room with it. Nope, this is another anvil.
Do we have like
Oh,
a picture of it existing?
yeah, I could add that. Oh, and one more thing. If you press escape, you get brought up to the main menu. And, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can restart. You can also go back to the game. So, yeah. And, oh, here's a crafting table. And we didn't have time to use it.
Inconvenient timing. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, but this is the second boss. And the strategy for you know what? I won't say the strategy. But basically, this boss will rush at you. If you hit it, it'll take damage. But if it hits you, you'll take damage. The strategy here is probably obviously to try and dodge the boss. Maybe you can also figure out its attack patterns, in which case you'll be able to, find the best places to attack it. But yeah.
Are we gonna show a full playthrough or?
Let's not.
Okay. Alright. Alright. Oh wait, that was supposed to.
Okay, so next up, let's talk about how we coded this.
So we used HTML for formatting and CSS for styling and JavaScript for functionality, as well as the core system of the game. Some of the more prominent concepts we used and integrated are a shader, maze generation, classes, file manipulation, optimization, and physics.
So we implemented a shader by using P5JS's ability to create an OpenGL instance. So the version of OpenGL that P5 implements is called WebGL, which supports a somewhat outdated version of OpenGL, which caused some conflicts with the shader. But eventually we got that working. Having a shader allows us to use GPU acceleration, which allows us to take an otherwise implausible task if we were to run it on the CPU and make use of the GPU's incredibly fast pixel manipulation abilities, in this case to render shadows. So basically what the shader does is it takes a map of where all the lights are and where objects are that block light, and then for every pixel it tries to draw a line between that pixel and the light source, and based on how long that line is, or whether that line is even able to connect, it sets a value to 0 or 1, 1 being the most light and 0 being no light, or anywhere in between. And then afterwards we map these values onto an existing render of the scene. So some optimizations are we halved the resolution that the shader works with, so it's actually scaled down, and then scaled up after it runs through the shader. And the shader only pushes a new frame every other draw frame, so that effectively doubles the performance.
Alright, now for the maze generation, it is essentially an infinite maze, which we create by using a random tree generation system. Pretty much it's a randomized minimum spanning tree. And one of the data structures that is used within maze generation and random tree generation is a disjoint set union data structure. We also use a seed. This way we can actually have for a specific seed the exact same world. And yeah, for classes, we also have many design patterns that are integrated into classes, such as inheritance, the factory pattern, strategy pattern, as well as state pattern. And overall, it also helped to organize the code immensely. Just have file manipulation, which we use through JSON, as well as the concept of a data folder, as well as some chunking, as well as on-the-spot generation to make sure that we optimize our random maze generation so that we only render or create the parts that actually matter to the user. And finally, we have the physics, which is essentially just collision detection as well as rectangular collision detection. And we also added the concept of layering, which you see in Unity and Godot, which essentially is a way to allow you to specify which objects should collide with which objects. And we also have boundaries as well as valid movement calculations for when we're trying to move an entity.
So now we'll talk about our inspiration. We wanted to incorporate maze exploration with dungeon fighting and maintaining a unique blend of both to appeal to a wider audience while still being fun and enjoyable to play. We incorporated quite a few elements to make a winter themed, ranging from more subtle additions to more obvious ones, such as our impeccable taste in background music.
Initially, we took inspiration from Soul Knight, and in terms of crafting and upgrading weapons, we took inspiration from Minecraft. We thought that it brought a new element of strategy to the game, and it turned out pretty well.
All right, so that's our game, Maze Marauder.
Feel free to give it a play yourself.
Thank you for listening to our pitch, and we hope you enjoyed the game.